Hello, I'm Marcelo, and on this tutorial we will learn about UiPath Coded Automations, which is basically a UiPath framework that allows to write automations using the C# programming language. So let's get started. First, to be able to use UiPath Code Automations, you'll need to have the UiPath Studio version equal or greater than 2023.6. If your UiPath Studio version is a version below, then you have to upgrade your UiPath Studio. And to do it, it's really simple. You can go through UiPath Automation Cloud, go to the downloads page, download the UiPath Studio installer, and then execute it to upgrade your UiPath Studio version to the latest version. Now let's create a new project and let's give it a name, UiPath Code Automation. Then you can choose a location and description if you want. About compatibility, it supported the Windows and cross-platform projects for UiPath Code Automations. Then the language, at the moment that I'm recording this tutorial, doesn't make any difference as it only affects the traditional UiPath workflows, so the low-code ones. But maybe at some point in the future when are supported more programming language for code automation workflows, it might affect also the language of the code automation workflow. So let's choose here C# as it will be the language of the code automation that we will develop using UiPath Code Automations. Now let's just click on the Create button. Now to create a code automation workflow, let's click here on New, and here we can see three options related to code automations. So code workflow, it's used for designing standard workflows, so automation workflows. Code test case, as the name indicates, it's used for designing test cases using code automation. And code source file can be used for creating code that you can later invoke or call in other coded file types. So here we'll use the coded workflow to create an automation workflow using code automations. Now let's just give it a name, so it can be yvank underscore loan application. And in a few seconds, we'll see what will be the automation that we'll develop using code automations. So now let's click here on Create. And here we have our coded workflow. So before diving into it, let's take a look to the automation that we'll develop. So it will be really simple. So it will open the browser on this website, ybank.wipath.com. Then it will click on Apply for a Loan, and then click here again, Apply for a Loan. Then it will submit here some data, so email address of requester, loan amount, loan term, current early income, and age. It will then submit the loan application. And after submit the loan application, the automation will verify if the loan was approved or not. And if it was, we will extract the loan rate and the loan ID. Here, of course, we could avoid these additional clicks that we will do, and open the browser directly here on this page. But to practice a bit more, we'll do these two additional clicks. So now let's go back to the coded workflow. So let's just delete this log. And the first step is to open the browser on the YBank website. So the easiest way to do Y automation on coded workflows, so to map the Y elements that we need to use during automation, it's by mapping the elements using object repositories. So here on the right side, we can find the object repository panel. So here we'll map the application that will automate and the elements that we'll need to use during our code automation. So first, let's add here a new application. Let's call it YBank. And now let's click on Create Application. So now that we have added the application, let's click on Create Screen. And now let's give a name to the screen like Home. And now let's indicate the screen. So let's indicate the initial page. So screen indicated, let's click on create screen. And now inside of this screen, let's map the elements that we'll need to interact with. So here we'll need to go to the apply for loan button. So we need to click here to then go to the next page. So here, let's do a right click on the home screen and let's click on create element. And now let's map our first screen element. So in this case, we will map the apply for loan button. So here, let's click on indicate element and let's indicate this element. Now let's just click on confirm. And here is the button. So now let's define the element name, apply for loan, as it is on the button name. So let's just hit save. So now we can set up our coded workflow to open the browser on the UiPath homepage and then click on the apply for loan button. So to open the browser or even application, we'll use the open service. It's like activity from the WaitState package. So first we need to call the WaitState package. So to do it easily, we can use the IntelliSense by pressing Ctrl plus space. And here we can see WaitState. Then let's add a dot. So here we can see the open activity, the open service. So, and now let's open parentheses to indicate the screen name. So where we want to open the browser. So we want to open the browser on the home screen of the UiPath application. So to indicate the screen name, let's open first double quotes and indicate the screen name as it is here on the object repository. Now let's close by adding a semicolon. And let's just see if our automation, our code workflow opens the browser on the UiPath homepage. So let's just run it. And here we can see that was open the browser on the UiPath homepage. So now let's set up our code workflow to click on apply for loan button. So to click on the apply for loan button, first we need to get like a reference of the screen where it's located, the button. So here let's just declare a variable var home screen equals, and now our variable home screen will get basically the screen, let's say, that we opened here, the home screen. So now below we can add a click on the screen. So here we can do home screen dot, and now we can execute certain actions on the elements on the screen. So we want to do a click, and now to do a click we need to indicate the target, so the button where we want to click. So here let's open the double quotes, and it's the same logic as we did here. So in this case we need to indicate the name of the element where we want to click. So it's apply for loan. Now let's close by adding semicolon in the end. So let's see how it goes. So let's close the browser again and run our code workflow. So it opens the browser, and then let's see if it clicks. And yes, it clicked on the apply for loan button, and now we are here. So now we need to map this new screen and then click again on this apply for loan button. So let's add here a new screen on the UiPath application. And now let's indicate the screen. And now let's define a screen name. So it can be, for example, loan screen. And let's click on create screen. So now after creating the screen, let's here on the loan screen add a new element. So it will be the apply for loan button. And let's confirm. Now let's just define the element name. So apply for a loan. And let's click save. So now let's do the same logic. So basically now we will not open again another screen. So now we will attach our automation to the new screen. So that is the loan screen. So here, let's create a new variable var loans screen or loan screen equals to yAutomation dot attach, and now let's indicate the screen that we want to attach. So we want to attach the apply the loan screen. So like this. So after attach to this screen and having so basically the reference to screen, let's now add here loan screen dot click, and so we want to click on the element from the loan screen, and which is the element, so it's the apply for a loan button. So we just have to indicate the name of the element as we did before. So let's give it a try and run it again. So I'll just close the browser again and let's run our coded workflow. So as we can see, it clicked first on apply for loan on the home page, then again apply for loan button on the loans page, and now we are here on the loan application form. So now we have to fill data on these fields and then submit the loan application. So now we have to add a new screen. So the loan application form screen. So let's here add a new screen. Let's indicate it first. Let's define the screen name, loan application screen. Let's click on create screen, and now let's map the fields, the input fields and the button. So to do it more quickly, we can here do a right click and click on capture elements. Now let's click here on this button to start recording. So first, let's indicate the email address of requester field. And so now we can click on save and continue. So we have mapped the email address field. So now let's indicate the next one, the loan amount requested input field. And let's just click on save and continue. Now will be the loan term dropdown. So let's click on save and continue. Then we have the current early income. Let's click on save and continue. Now let's indicate the age input field. And in last, on this screen, let's indicate the submit loan application button. And let's click on save and continue. And now let's save by clicking here. So here we can see the elements that we have added to this screen. So first, let's attach to the loan application screen. So bar loan application screen equals to yAutomation dot attach, and let's attach to the existing screen that will be open after click on the apply for loan button. So here let's indicate the screen name. And now that we are attached to the screen, and now that we have its reference here on our variable, we can automate in it. So first, let's fill data on email address of requester field. So on our code workflow, let's call here first the variable that acts like a reference of our screen, loan application screen dot, and now first we want to type into the email address field. So we will use the TypeInto service. Then let's open parentheses, and we have to indicate the target where we want to write some text. So we have to indicate the name of the field of the element, email address, as it is on the object repository. And then let's add a comma and let's indicate the text to write. So let's indicate here John at example.com, for example. And let's just see if it does something on the field. So I will just run the coded workflow. And here we can see so the Jean at example.com. So it's working as expected. So now let's fill on the other fields. So now here let's add loan application again, screen. So let's call the variable and we want to type into the loan amount requested field. So let's indicate the element name that represents the loan amount requested field. And here let's put a random value. Then we can see that we have a drop down, so we will not use the TypeInto service. So here let's call again the variable loan application screen dot, and now we'll use the select item service that allows to select an item from a drop down. So first we have to indicate the target, so it's the loan term element, and then we have to indicate values, so a item that exists on the drop down. So let's indicate a 10, for example. Now we just have another two input fields, so I'll just speed up a bit, copy this one that has a TypeInto, and now we just have to change the current early income. So here we just have, and now we just have to change the element name. So here is the current early. And here let's indicate a random early income. And now again for the age field, so now we just have to change the element, the target. So it's the age element. And here let's add, for example, 20. Then after fill the data on the input fields, we want to click on submit loan application button. So loan application screen dot click, and now let's indicate where we want to click. So on the submit loan application element. And that's it. So let's see if it's working well, and if we go through the next page where it says the loan status. So I'll close the browser and run the coded workflow. So email address, the loan amount requested. Now it will indicate the loan term. And seems that we got an exception, and it was with the loan term field. So seems that it was not found the element. So let's here on the object repository, click on edit element on the loan term element. And let's click on edit descriptor, check if there is something wrong. So seems that element is detected. So let's just change the input mode. I will disable the computer vision, and let's indicate again the field with the computer vision disabled. So now let's click on confirm. Let's click on save, and let's just run again our coded workflow. Now it worked, so we have the loan term defined, current early income, age, and then here we can see the loan status. So now let's map this screen, so then we can validate if the loan was approved or not, and if it is, we will extract the loan APR, so the loan rate and the loan ID. So here let's add a new screen on the object repository, and so let's call it a loan status screen. Let's indicate the screen. Let's click on create screen, and now let's map the elements that we may interact on the screen. So let's click here on capture elements, and now let's click here on this button to record. So first let's indicate this label that indicates the loan was approved, and we will use it to validate if the loan was approved or not. So if it appears, that means that the loan was approved. If not, it means that the loan was not approved. So now let's map the loan rate value that appears if the loan is approved, and I will just change here to APR, and here element named loan approved on the label. And now let's map the loan ID. So let's just change this element name to loan ID. And now we can click on Save and Continue and save. And here we have the elements that we have added. So first we'll validate if the loan was approved or not. So we'll validate by checking if it appears this label, you've been approved for a loan. Because when the loan it's not approved, it appears saying that the loan was not approved, as we can see here on the screen. So here first we will attach to the new screen, so loan status screen equals to automation dot attach, and now we'll attach to the loan status screen. So now to validate if it appears this label, we'll use a service like the check app state, the element exist activity. So here let's call for our screen variable dot, and now here we'll use the WaitState. So basically we can use this service to check if an element appears or not. Now let's open parentheses, and here let's indicate first the element that we want to check if it appears. So it will be the loan approved, and I will just change the name of the element to loan approved label, as it seems a bit strange to just say loan approved. After indicate the target element, we have to indicate the check state options. So here we indicate if we want to check the visibility of the element, so indicate true or false, and also what's the mode of the check state, the wait state, if we want to check if element appears or disappears. So for that, let's here on the top indicate, so create a variable that will store these options. So here we can see that it's basically a helper that we have to declare. So basically on our case, a variable of the type check state options. So here let's indicate check state options, and now let's define so the variable name. So this is the type of the variable, and now let's indicate the variable name check state options to new check state options. Now let's indicate the options that we want to define, and to know what options we can define, we can use IntelliSense. So we can indicate the check visibility to check if element is visible or not. So let's indicate this as true. And then let's add a comma, and now we have another property, the mode. So here we'll indicate to check if we want to check if element appears or disappears. So here we indicate mode, and now let's add here an equals. And so here we have to use the end check state mode dot, and now let's indicate the mode. So the mode is wait appear. So we want to wait the element to appear. So, and that's it. So now in the end, let's add a semicolon to close the statement. And now here let's pass our variable that stores the check state options. And then here let's add a semicolon, and now let's create a variable that will store basically the output, so the true or false. So if the element is found, it will be a true. If not, it's a false. So we'll have a boolean variable unless you find the name is loan approved. And that's it basically. So now we can use the if else statement. So here if is loan approved. So if this is true, that means that the loan was approved. And we can add here just a log. So the loan was approved. Else log the loan wasn't approved. So let's just check if it's working properly. So let's just close the browser and run the coded workflow. So the loan was approved. Let's check here the output, and it says the loan was approved, so it worked well. So now I'll just create here a case that I know that the loan will not be approved. So let's just change the age to 10. So by this way the loan will not be approved, and so we can validate if the validation is working properly also when the loan is not approved. As we can see, the loan was not approved and automation ended. And here, if we check the output, we can see the loan wasn't approved. So it's working properly here, our validation. So in the case when the loan is approved, we want to extract some additional information like the loan APR, so the loan rate and the loan ID. So here, let's call our screen variable dot, and so to extract text from a element we'll use the GetText service. So we just have to indicate the target. So the target first will be the APR element, and now let's create a variable that will store the APR. So here on the top, let's declare the variable string loan APR or loan rate, and so here let's call it so loan rate equals to the output from this service. Now we can copy this, and so here just have to change the element name to loan ID to extract the loan ID. And now let's declare another variable string loan ID. So loan ID will be equal to the output from this expression. So now let's just add here logs to see if the loan rate and loan ID is extracted successfully. So let's just close the browser, so it's already closed, and let's run our coded workflow. So in this case, the loan is not approved, so let's just change the age. I forgot that detail, so let's just run again. So by this way, the loan will be approved. Loan approved. So now the automation will end its execution. So let's check the output. So the loan was approved, but we can see the loan ID was not extracted for some reason. So let's just check here the selector of the element. So let's click here on edit text descriptor. So yeah, let's here just disable the computer vision image fuzzy selector, and let's just enable the strict selector. I will not tweak it. I will just leave like as it is now. So just for this demo. So let's just confirm and let's just run again. The loan was approved. So let's check now the logs again. And now, yes, here we have the loan rate and the loan ID. So now that we did here some development on our code automation, let's see some improvements that we can do so it can be more faster and stable. So If you notice the behavior of the click activity, by default here on the code automation, it uses the hardware events input type. So that means that it does really a click as a user does on the button. So it's a slower and a more unstable method. So it will better to use the simulate or Chrome API input mode. So to use it, we can here, if you notice here on the click a service, if you have a command, we can pass the click options where we can define some properties like the click type. So if it's a simulate, how many clicks, if it's a single, double click. So let's see how it works. So let's declare a variable of type click options. And now let's define the variable name click options equals to new click options. And now here, let's see the options that we have available. So we can use the IntelliSense, Control plus space. So now we can use here the IntelliSense, so doing Control plus space to know the properties that we can define on this variable type. So we can define the click type. So if it's a single, a double, up or down click, the interaction mode, define if it's to use the simulate, the Chrome API, the background, or the Windows messages mode. So let's define interaction mode. So currently it's using like the hardware's event mode that acts like a human. So let's change that to the debugger API. So we can use the background debugger API, email messages, and simulate. So let's use the debugger API. That, if I'm not wrong, it's like the Chromium API. So now we have to add an implicit cast because of this error. So we can use here the helper. Click on add explicit cast, and the issue is solved. So now let's provide this click options variable to our click activities. Let's just not forget the comma. And let's see if we notice some difference. So I'll close the browser and run the workflow. So we can already notice the difference. So it's much more faster and it doesn't act like a human. So it doesn't do really a click on the button. It just sends an instruction on the button, like doing API call. So sending instruction to the button, and basically the click, it's done without having to go to the button and click. So it feels much better now. So another thing that we can use is to change the TypeInto input mode. So we can see that it acts like a human. It writes letter by letter. So it's like the hardware event mode. So we could change that. So let's try on one of the TypeInto services. So here on this one, on the email address, so if we use here, we can see here that we have to provide a TypeInto options variable. So basically, it's similar to what we have done to the click options. So let's declare here the TypeInto options variable type. And now we can see the props that we can define using IntelliSense. So here, let's change the interaction mode. So interaction mode equal. So here, basically, let's use the same. Then here, we can define some other properties. So let's just add a comma in the hand. So here we can define the text to basically insert on the field. So for example, here we can have the text. So basically the email address. So equals. Now here, let's add John at example.com. And now we can provide here this TypeInto options variable. And also another tip to format so the code to be aligned, well structured, we can do here a right click and click on format document or use just these shortcuts. And now it looks better, it's aligned. So let's see if we notice some difference on this TypeInto on the email address field. So let's just run the workflow again. And now we can see the difference. So it was basically instantaneous, so it didn't act like a human. So inserting letter by letter, it was basically like a copy paste. So it's a better method than the default one here on the code automation workflow on the TypeInto service. Now we'll cover some more topics on code automation, so like how we can add breakpoints to debug our coded workflow, and then also how we can integrate a low-code workflow in our code automation, and vice versa, how we can use a code automation in low-code workflow. And so let's see first about debugging. So we can add breakpoint by doing right-click, and then we can click on toggle breakpoint, and we will add a breakpoint on the line that it's selected. And then to remove the breakpoint, we can click on it, or else to add a breakpoint, we can just click here on the side. So for example, let's add here a breakpoint on this button. So on the first button that we have to click. So by this way, the automation have to pause at this step. So let's see if it stops by running the code workflow on debug mode. And here we can see that it stopped at the breakpoint, and then we can here step in because basically the automation paused here on debug, and then we can use here some of the debug features. So let's just remove this breakpoint. Now let's see how we can integrate a low-code workflow in our coded automation. So let's create a low-code workflow, or better, let's use the one that already exists on our project. And basically, let's add a message box on it. And so the idea is to show the loan ID and loan APR extracted from our coded workflow on our low-code workflow. So let's here add arguments. So let's add argument in underscore str loan rate. So make sure the direction is in. So we will receive a value from the code automation to our low-code workflow. And now let's create another for the loan ID. So here the text, so let's show a loan ID. Now let's call the argument that will start loan ID, and then let's just add a new line. And so here let's call loan rate, and let's call the argument that will start the loan rate. So here we have our low-code workflow. So now we have to invoke it here on our coded workflow and pass to the arguments the loan rate and the loan ID. So to invoke here workflow here, so in this case we want to only invoke it when the loan is approved to show these values, the loan rate and loan ID. So here let's use the run workflow service. And now here we have to provide the path of the workflow. So basically here, as it's on the same folder, let's say, we just have to indicate the workflow name, but let's say that the low-code workflow was on a specific folder, we have to indicate it. So the path to that folder and the file. So here we want to invoke our main workflow. And now we have to provide the values to the arguments from our low-code workflow. So here we have to pass basically a dictionary of string, keys, and object. So it will be the values. So here let's add new dictionary. And now string, keys, and object, that will be the of values object, and then let's add here object that will be for the values. Now let's open here parentheses, and then let's add here so the arguments that we want to provide. So now just to be more simple, let's here format the document. Let's add here semicolon. So now we have to open again curly brackets. So let's open them. And now here let's so indicate the argument name that comes from our low code workflow and a value to provide to that argument. So here first let's so define the argument name. So in str loan rate, and then let's indicate the value. So the value it's on the loan rate variable, and that's it. So now let's add a comma and do the same for the other argument. So I will just check if it's right. So yeah, it is. So now here loan ID, and let's provide so the variable that stores the loan ID. So let's see how it works. So I'll just close the browser and run again our coded workflow. And here we can see that was invoked our low-code workflow, and here we can see the loan ID that comes from the coded workflow and also the loan rate. So now if we click on OK, we'll go back to the coded workflow and log on the log services the loan ID and the loan rate, as we can see here. So now let's check out the opposite, how we can integrate, so invoke a code automation on a low code automation, a low code workflow. So here on our main, we can, so let's just remove or comment this message box. And now let's go to activities panel and use the invoke workflow activity. And let's select our coded workflow. So here, make sure you select all files to appear so our coded workflow. And now let's comment here the part where we invoke our low code workflow by selecting here this statement where we pass the arguments and invoke the workflow. And let's click here on comment. Let's save. And let's run from our low-code workflow. So as we can see, we're able to run, so to invoke our coded workflow from the low-code one. And that's it for this tutorial. If you liked it, please give a thumbs up and also subscribe to the channel and enable notifications bell so you'll get notified on each tutorial released on the channel. So I'll see you on the next tutorial.